processes of reproduction in human beings from the time of puberty and events associated with reproduction, all these events are under the control of hormones. So let us now study the hormonal control of human reproduction. Three important endocrine glands are involved in this hormonal control. Hypothalamus, pituitary, and the gonads themselves. Hypothalamus produces what are known as releasing hormones. These releasing hormones promote the release of reproduction controlling or reproduction related hormones produced by the pituitary. Last year you have studied that the pituitary gland produces two important hormones related to reproduction: follicle stimulating hormone, abbreviated as FSH, and luteinizing hormone, abbreviated as LH. There is a releasing hormone for FSH, it is called FSH-RH. There is a releasing hormone for LH, it is called LH-RH. FSH and LH influence the gonads in their various functions as also the accessory reproductive structures. The gonads themselves produce a set of steroid hormones. These steroid hormones influence not only the gonads but also the accessory reproductive structures as well as the gametes, the sperms and the ova. The steroid hormones provide a negative feedback to FSH and LH and to the releasing hormones. FSH and LH in turn to the hypothalamus. So there is a negative feedback mechanism. There is a negative feedback mechanism that operates in the hormonal control of human reproduction, and this negative feedback mechanism operates between gonads and pituitary, gonads and hypothalamus, pituitary and hypothalamus. Suppose we generalize this idea. Hypothalamus as you know is an important part of the human brain. It also functions as an endocrine gland by producing some releasing hormones. Among the releasing hormones produced by the hypothalamus, there is a releasing hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone. Gonadotropin releasing hormone, abbreviated as GnRH. There is a separate gonadotropin releasing hormone for FSH-RH, called FSH-RH, for promoting the release of FSH from pituitary. Similarly, there is a separate releasing hormone called LHRH for promoting the release of LH from pituitary. So both these releasing hormones influence pituitary, the anterior pituitary, to secrete reproduction related hormones. Under the influence of FSH-RH, pituitary releases FSH. Under the influence of LHRH, pituitary releases LH. Both these LH and FSH influence the gonads. FSH in the gonads mainly influences gametogenesis, spermatogenesis in the testis, oogenesis in the ovary. LH influences in the gonads a process called steroidogenesis, that is production of steroid hormones. When gametogenesis is complete, there is a negative feedback. On the pituitary to stop the or reduce the production of FSH. Pituitary in turn sends a negative feedback to the hypothalamus to reduce the production of FSH-RH. So this is negative feedback. In the same way, when steroidogenesis is promoted, gonads produce the respective steroid hormones, androgens, estrogen, etc. An increase in the concentration of these hormones has a negative feedback on the pituitary. Pituitary reduces the production of LH. Pituitary in turn sends a negative feedback to the hypothalamus to reduce the production of LHRH. So when the production of LHRH decreases, the production of LH decreases. When the production of LH decreases, steroidogenesis decreases. So this is again a negative feedback. So this is a scheme showing the negative feedback mechanism that operates in the hormonal control of human reproduction. Let us now see what is the mechanism of hormonal control in male reproduction. Again, hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormones. One is called FSHRH, follicle stimulating hormone releasing hormone. The other one is called LHRH. Both these, FSHRH and LHRH, exert their influence on the pituitary gland. In response to the influence of FSHRH, pituitary releases FSH. Similarly, in response to the influence of LHRH, pituitary releases luteinizing hormone. FSH and LH, both these exert their influence on the gonads. FSH, that is on the testis. FSH promotes, on one hand, spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis results in the production of spermatozoa. On the other hand, FSH influences the production of inhibin. Inhibin is a hormone produced by Sertoli cells. Remember, we have talked about Sertoli cells, supporting cells in the testis. Under the influence of FSH, Sertoli cells produce a hormone, inhibin. This hormone, inhibin, has a negative feedback on the production of FSH. I will come back to that. Under the influence of LH, testis releases a set of steroid hormones called androgens. These androgens influence the sperms and influence the accessory reproductive organs. Inhibin has a negative feedback on the pituitary, either to increase the production of FSH or to decrease the production of FSH as and when necessary, depending on the progress in spermatogenesis. In response to this, the pituitary has a negative feedback on hypothalamus to bring about variation in the concentration of FSHRH so that it can influence FSH. Variations in the concentration of androgens has a negative feedback on pituitary. Accordingly, the concentration of LH varies. To achieve this, pituitary will have to send a negative feedback to hypothalamus to bring about a variation in the concentration of LH or H. There are two significant aspects here. One is the entire cycle of spermatogenesis, starting from spermatogonial mother cells to the formation of sperms. Spermatogenic cycle takes about 60 to 75 days. 60 to 75 days. So during these 60 to 75 days, depending on the requirement, the concentration of FSH and LH has to vary. Accordingly, the concentration of FSH-RH and LH-RH also has to vary. But in the male, remember, there is no reproductive cycle. There is no reproductive cycle that repeats at regular intervals. So this is the mechanism of hormonal control of male reproduction. On the other hand, suppose we look into the situation in female reproduction. Again, hypothalamus producing GnRH, there is a follicle stimulating hormone releasing hormone and luteinizing hormone releasing hormone. Both these hormones exerting their influence on the anterior pituitary, releasing FSH and LH. FSH and LH, both these hormones influencing the gonads, that is ovaries. In the ovaries, FSH mainly influences one, there is oogenesis, and oogenesis resulting in the formation of ovum. Under the influence of FSH, there is formation of estrogen, whereas LH influences the production of another steroid hormone, progesterone. LH is also responsible for release of the ovum, ovulation. Estrogen influences the ovum. Estrogen influences accessory reproductive structures. Similarly, progesterone influences accessory reproductive structures. So variations occur in the concentration of estrogen and progesterone, and based on this there is a negative feedback to the pituitary, from the pituitary to the hypothalamus. This negative feedback is mainly for FSH and FSH-RH. Progesterone has a separate feedback mechanism on the pituitary and from the pituitary to the hypothalamus, and this negative feedback is mainly for LH and LH-RH. So in female reproduction, one important aspect is you find significant variations in the concentration of the hormones that are involved in the control. Variations in the concentration of estrogen and progesterone, accordingly FSH and LH, accordingly FSH-RH and LH. Significant variations in the concentration of hormones, and there is a distinct reproductive cycle. There is a distinct reproductive cycle in females which repeats regularly over a specific period of time, and this reproductive cycle is known as menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle, it has a periodicity of 28 plus or minus 2 days. So regularly over a period of 28 plus or minus 2 days, these cyclic events repeat. Therefore, during this period of 28 days, you see significant variations in the concentration of these hormones. In the next class, we will go to more details about menstrual cycle.